There was something different about him lately. She couldn't put her finger on it, but she felt it deep inside. Her husband, who had always been kind and loving, seemed distracted. He came home later than usual, and when she asked about his day, his answers were short, almost robotic. He was always on his phone, looking at it with a level of secrecy that she hadn't seen before. At first, she thought it was just stress. Life had been busy for both of them. They had their routine, their children to care for, and bills to pay. Work was demanding, and sometimes the weight of it all took its toll. She brushed it off, thinking he just needed time to unwind after a long day. But then the small things began to add up. The late nights stretched into weeks. His phone seemed to be glued to his hand. She noticed his smile didn't quite reach his eyes anymore, and his laughter seemed forced. She wanted to ask him what was going on, but she was afraid. What if he wasn't just stressed? What if something else was happening? One evening, as he went to bed early, leaving her alone with her thoughts, she noticed his jacket on the back of a chair. She didn't mean to snoop, but something inside urged her to look. She reached into the pocket and found an envelope. It was thick, and the paper felt heavier than usual. Her heart skipped a beat as she pulled it out. It was sealed with a wax stamp, a detail she didn't recognize. Her curiosity overtook her hesitation. She carefully opened the envelope and pulled out a set of photographs, each one showing her husband with a woman she didn't recognize. The photos were taken in different places, cafes, parks, even a hotel lobby. They were always smiling, close to each other in a way that felt too intimate for mere friendship. Along with the pictures were letters handwritten in a neat script. They were love letters filled with words that were meant to be shared only between two people. Her hands trembled as she read through the letters. They spoke of secret meetings, late-night conversations, and promises to always be there for each other. The pain she felt was instant and sharp, like a stab to the heart. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. How had she missed this? How had she not known? For the rest of the night, she sat in silence, the envelope and letters in front of her. Her mind raced with questions. How long had this been going on? Why hadn't he told her? And why now? Was she just not enough for him? The next morning, her husband acted like everything was normal. He kissed her on the cheek, asked if she slept well, and made his usual small talk as they had breakfast. But she could hardly hear him. Her mind was still reeling from the discovery. Her emotions swirled in confusion and hurt, and though she wanted to confront him, she couldn't bring herself to do it. She wasn't ready to face the truth, not yet. The day dragged on. At work, she found herself staring blankly at her computer screen, her thoughts elsewhere. Every time her husband called, her heart would race. She knew he was still hiding something, but she didn't know what to do with the information she had. Should she confront him now? Should she give him the chance to explain? By the time she got home, she was exhausted, not just from work, but from the emotional weight she was carrying. She stood in front of the door, hesitating for a moment. The thought of walking in and pretending nothing had changed seemed impossible. But what would happen if she asked him about it? What would he say? That night after dinner, when their children were settled in their rooms, she couldn't hold back any longer. She needed answers. She needed to know if everything she had believed in was a lie. She asked him if they could talk, and for the first time in a long time, he seemed genuinely concerned. He looked at her with those familiar warm eyes, but she could see the tension in his face. He knew something was coming. "Is everything okay?" he asked, his voice soft. She shook her head, struggling to keep the tears at bay. It wasn't like her to cry, especially not in front of him, but her heart was breaking and she couldn't stop it. "I know about the letters," she said, her voice trembling. "I found them in your jacket." His face went pale. He stood up slowly, his hands raised in defense. I can explain," he stammered, but she could barely hear him. Her mind was spinning too fast. Too many thoughts running through her head. She wanted to scream, to ask him why. Why had he done this? Why had he kept it from her for so long? But instead she just sat there, feeling a numbness spread through her. It wasn't anger she felt, it was a crushing sadness, a sense of betrayal that seemed too heavy to bear. He sat down beside her, his voice shaky as he tried to explain. "It was a mistake," he said. "It meant nothing. I never wanted to hurt you." But his words felt empty, like they were coming from someone she didn't know. The man who had promised to love her through thick and thin now felt like a stranger. She stared at him, searching for any sign of the man she married. But all she saw was guilt. "I don't know what to believe," she whispered, her voice barely audible. He looked at her with pleading eyes, his hand reaching out to touch hers, but she pulled away. The hurt was too raw, too fresh. She needed time. She needed space to think. She spent the rest of the night alone, her thoughts a whirlwind of confusion and anger. How could this happen? How could she have been so blind? And what did it mean for their future? She wasn't sure, but one thing was clear. Her world had just been turned upside down, and she didn't know if she could ever trust him again. The next morning, things felt different. The house was quieter, the air heavier. She looked at him and saw a man who had broken something that could never be fully repaired. And yet part of her still loved him. Part of her still believed in the man she married. But the question remained, could she forgive him? Could she live with the secret he had kept from her? She didn't have the answer yet. All she knew was that everything had changed, and she had no idea what the future held. The morning after the confrontation felt like a blur. Everything around her seemed distant, as if she were looking through a fogged-up window. The house felt quieter than usual. Her husband had left for work early, and the silence was overwhelming. She sat in the kitchen, the untouched cup of coffee before her, staring at it without really seeing it. The words they had exchanged the night before echoed in her mind. His pleading eyes, the shaky voice, the promises that meant nothing to her now. It all felt like a dream, a nightmare that wouldn't end. She couldn't understand how everything had changed overnight. How had they gotten to this point? They had built a life together, shared dreams, plans, laughter, and love. But now there was nothing but hurt and confusion. She had trusted him completely, believed in their bond. How could he have kept something like this from her? How long had it been going on? Was their entire relationship a lie? The questions kept swirling in her mind, each one more painful than the last. She couldn't stop thinking about the letters, the photographs, the intimate moments they shared that she had never known about. The love she had once felt for him now felt distant, almost foreign. She tried to push away the thoughts, tried to focus on the daily tasks ahead, but it was impossible. Her heart was heavy with a weight she couldn't shake. Later that afternoon, as she was folding laundry, her husband called. She could feel her heart race as soon as she saw his name on the screen. The phone felt heavy in her hand, and for a moment she considered ignoring it. She wasn't ready to talk to him, not yet, but she didn't want to avoid him forever either. So she answered the call. "Hi," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. She could tell he was trying to sound normal, but there was an edge to his tone. He was nervous, unsure of what to say. He had every right to be. "Hey, how's it going?" he asked, the words sounding almost rehearsed. "Fine," she replied curtly. She wasn't ready to pretend everything was fine. Not now, not after what she had discovered. "Listen, I know last night was a lot. I didn't expect you to react like that. He paused, clearly trying to find the right words. "I just want to make this right." She took a deep breath. "Make it right? How? How do you expect me to trust you again after everything I found out?" Her voice wavered with the weight of her words, but she didn't care anymore. The anger that had been simmering inside her was slowly rising to the surface. "I never wanted to hurt you," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "I swear it was a mistake. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I'm sorry. I should have told you sooner." She wanted to scream at him, to demand answers, to tell him that it was too late for apologies. But instead she sat there in silence. She didn't know what to say. She was angry, hurt and confused, but part of her still wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that he didn't mean to hurt her, that he was just caught up in something that he didn't know how to get out of. But the truth was, she wasn't sure she could ever trust him again. The thought of what he had done felt like a betrayal, and it cut deeper than anything she had ever experienced. She had loved him with all her heart, and now that love felt tainted. "Can we talk about this when you get home?" she asked, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside her. "Of course," he replied quickly. "I'll be home as soon as I can. We'll figure this out. I'll do whatever it takes to make it right." She ended the call without another word. She didn't know what making it right meant. Could things ever go back to the way they were? Could she ever forgive him, even if he apologized? She didn't know the answers, and that scared her more than anything. The rest of the afternoon passed in a haze. She went through the motions of her daily routine, but nothing felt the same. She couldn't focus. She couldn't stop thinking about what her husband had done, about the lies he had told her. Every time she closed her eyes, the images from the photographs flashed in her mind. His smile, the way he held the other woman, the intimacy they shared. It felt like a punch to the gut every time. By the time her husband came home that evening, she had barely eaten or spoken to anyone. Her thoughts were a tangled mess, and she wasn't sure she was ready to face him again, but she knew they needed to talk. She couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. He walked in the door, his face pale, his eyes searching hers for any sign of forgiveness. She could see the weight of guilt in his expression, and part of her almost felt sorry for him, but the hurt was too fresh, too raw. She wasn't sure she could look at him the same way again. "Can we sit down?" he asked quietly. She nodded and led him to the living room, her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't know where this conversation would lead, but she knew it was the beginning of a long and painful journey, one that might not have a happy ending. "I'm listening," she said, her voice low but firm. He sighed and sat down next to her, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. "I don't know where to start," he admitted. "I never wanted to hurt you. I love you more than anything, and I've made a terrible mistake. I don't expect you to forgive me right away. I just want you to understand that it wasn't what it seemed. It wasn't about you." She looked at him, her eyes searching his for any sign of truth. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that this wasn't the end of their marriage, that they could somehow work through this. But it was hard. It was so hard to ignore the feeling of betrayal that still weighed on her heart. "I don't know if I can forgive you," she said quietly. "I don't know if I can ever trust you again. You kept something like this from me for so long. I don't understand how you could do that." "I was scared," he admitted, his voice barely a whisper. "Scared of losing you. Scared of what this would do to our family. I never wanted to hurt you, but I did, and now I have to live with that. But I'll do whatever it takes to make it right. I'll prove to you that I love you, that you mean everything to me." She looked at him, her heart torn. She had loved him for so long, and a part of her still did. But could she ever trust him again? Could she forgive him for breaking her heart? "I don't know what the future holds," she said softly, "but I can't make any decisions right now. I need time. I need space to think." He nodded, his eyes full of regret. "I understand. Take all the time you need. I'll be here when you're ready." And with that, she stood up and walked away, leaving him there, his words hanging in the air between them. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing. She couldn't keep living in this state of uncertainty. She needed answers, and she needed to find the strength to make the right decision for herself. The days that followed were filled with an emptiness that was hard to explain. She went through the motions of daily life, but her mind was constantly elsewhere. The weight of the betrayal hung over her like a shadow, following her wherever she went. She couldn't escape it. Every time she saw her husband, a flood of emotions rushed through her, but she had learned to keep her distance. She wasn't sure if she was protecting herself or him. Her children, blissfully unaware of the turmoil unfolding in their home, kept her grounded. They needed her. They needed her to be strong, to be there for them. She couldn't let them see the cracks in her heart. But even as she went through the motions of being a mother, her mind would wander back to the discovery. The letters, the photos, the whispered promises he had made to someone else. The trust she had once had in him had been shattered, and she didn't know how to put the pieces back together. She decided she needed to talk to someone. Someone who wasn't involved in the situation, someone who could offer a fresh perspective. She called her best friend, someone she had known for years, someone who had been with her through the highs and lows of her life. They had always shared everything, and this time she needed her friend more than ever. They agreed to meet for coffee the next morning. It was early when she arrived at the cafe, and she was already sitting at the table by the time her friend walked in. Her friend looked at her, concern written all over her face. She didn't even need to ask. It was obvious that something was wrong. "Hey," her friend said softly, sitting down across from her. "What's going on?" She hesitated for a moment, unsure if she was ready to share the details. But then she realized that holding it in was only making it worse. She needed to talk. She needed to let the words out. "I found something," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Something that shattered everything I thought I knew about my husband." Her friend leaned in, her face filled with worry. "What do you mean?" "I found letters. Love letters. And pictures. Of him with another woman." Her friend's eyes widened. "Oh my God," she whispered, her hand reaching out to touch hers in a comforting gesture. "I don't know what to do," she continued. the words spilling out. I confronted him about it and he says it was a mistake, that it meant nothing. But I don't know if I believe him. How could he keep something like that from me for so long? How could he be with someone else and then come home to me like nothing happened? Her friend sat back, processing everything she had just heard. I can't imagine how you must feel. But what are you going to do? Have you decided if you're going to forgive him? She stared down at her coffee cup, not sure how to answer. The idea of forgiveness seemed impossible, yet part of her didn't want to give up on her marriage. She had built a life with him. They had children together. She loved him despite everything. I don't know, she said, her voice shaking slightly. I love him. I always have. But how do you come back from something like this? How do you rebuild trust when it's been broken so completely? Her friend nodded, her expression understanding. It's not going to be easy. It's going to take time, and you have to decide if it's worth it. But you can't make any decisions now. You need to give yourself time to process everything. I don't even know where to start, she admitted. I'm so angry and I'm hurt. But I don't want to destroy everything we've built. I don't know if I'm strong enough to move past this. You don't have to figure it all out today, her friend said gently. Take it one day at a time. Talk to him when you're ready, but don't make any decisions in the heat of the moment. You need to take care of yourself first. Her words were comforting, but they didn't make the pain go away. She appreciated her friend's advice, but deep down, she knew this was a decision she had to make on her own. There was no quick fix, no easy way out. The damage had been done, and she had to decide if she could live with it. When she got home that afternoon, her husband was waiting for her. She had been dreading this moment, but she knew it was time to face him. She couldn't keep avoiding the conversation. He needed to understand how deep the hurt went, and she needed to understand why he had done what he did. He was sitting in the living room when she walked in, his eyes downcast, his hands clasped together. It was clear he had been waiting for her to say something, but she didn't know where to start. She didn't know what to say. I talked to someone today, she said, her voice steady but quiet. Someone who helped me understand that I need time. Time to process everything that's happened. Time to figure out what I want. Her husband's eyes lifted, a flicker of hope in them. What does that mean? Are you saying you'll forgive me? She shook her head, her chest tightening. I don't know if I can forgive you. I don't know if I can ever trust you again. But I need time to think. I need space to figure out if this marriage is worth saving. He looked like he was about to say something, but then he paused. He seemed to understand that she needed space, that she needed to make her own decision. I understand, he said quietly. I'll give you the time you need. But I love you and I'll do anything to fix this. She nodded, but inside she wasn't sure if love would be enough. She wasn't sure if it could heal the wounds that had been caused. The damage was deep, and even though she loved him, she didn't know if love alone could repair the trust that had been broken. That night, as she lay in bed, she tried to sleep, but the thoughts kept coming. The images from the letters, the photos of him with another woman, the lies he had told. She felt betrayed, hurt, and angry, but she also felt a deep sadness, a sense of loss. Could she ever forgive him? Could she ever move on from this? She didn't have the answers. All she knew was that she had to make a decision. She had to decide what was best for her, for their family, and for her own peace of mind. It wasn't going to be easy. It was going to take time, but she knew that eventually she would have to face the truth, no matter how painful it might be. And with that thought, she closed her eyes, not knowing what the future held, but knowing she would have to find the strength to face it. The days were passing slowly, each one feeling like an eternity. The space she had asked for felt suffocating, yet she knew it was necessary. Her mind was still in a constant whirlwind, and although the anger had started to fade, the hurt remained deep and raw. She kept trying to distract herself, pouring herself into her work, spending time with her children, but no matter how busy she kept herself, the thoughts always crept back in. Every conversation she had, every moment of silence, seemed to remind her of the betrayal that had shaken everything she believed in. Her husband had respected the time she needed, but the absence of his presence at home was unsettling. He had stopped trying to convince her, stopped apologizing. Instead, he waited for her to make the first move, as if he was giving her space to heal. But it felt like he was pulling away even further, and it hurt. It hurt more than she could explain. It was like she was losing him, not because of the betrayal, but because of the walls that were now between them. Every time she saw him, he looked at her with those same sad eyes, but the connection they once had was missing. There was a distance between them that couldn't be ignored. She wanted to reach out to him, to hold him, to tell him that everything could be fixed, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she felt like a stranger in her own home, walking around in a haze, uncertain of what to do next. One night, after putting the children to bed, she sat down in the living room, staring at the clock. The house was quiet, and she knew her husband would be coming in soon. It had been a long day, and she felt emotionally drained. She couldn't keep avoiding the inevitable. She needed to talk to him. She needed to know what was going on inside his head, what he was feeling, and if there was any hope left for their marriage. When he walked in, he didn't say anything at first. He simply sat across from her, his expression unreadable. She could tell he was waiting for her to speak, but the words were stuck in her throat. It felt like everything she had been holding in for days was about to come pouring out. "I don't know where to begin," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. He looked at her, his eyes filled with concern. "We can take this slow. I just want to know what you're feeling." She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. "I'm confused. I'm angry. I'm hurt, and I don't know how to move forward. Part of me wants to just walk away from all of this. But another part of me, well, that part still loves you. I can't seem to get rid of that part." He nodded slowly, his hands clasped together in his lap. "I don't expect you to have all the answers right now. I've hurt you more than I can say, and I can't undo what I've done. I can't fix this by just saying I'm sorry. But I want to do everything I can to prove to you that I can be better." Her heart ached as she listened to him. His words sounded sincere, but there was still so much doubt in her heart. She didn't know if she could ever believe in him the way she once had. She didn't know if she could ever trust him again. "I don't know if I can believe you," she admitted, tears welling up in her eyes. "I don't know if I can ever trust you again. And that scares me. I've spent so many years building this life with you. Our family, our home, everything. And now it feels like all of it is falling apart. I don't know how to fix that." He reached out, placing his hand gently on hers. "I don't want to lose you. I don't want to lose this family. I'll do whatever it takes. I'll work every day, every moment to rebuild what we had. I know it's going to take time, and I know it won't be easy, but I'm willing to fight for us." She looked at him, seeing the pain in his eyes. She could see that he was hurting too, that he felt the weight of his actions, but the question still lingered in her mind. Was love enough to heal this kind of betrayal? "I don't know if it's enough," she said, her voice trembling. "I don't know if I can ever forget what you did. I don't know if I can look at you the same way. But I do know that I need time. Time to figure out if this is something I can work through, and time to figure out if I can ever forgive you." He nodded, tears brimming in his eyes as well. "I understand. I'll give you all the time you need, and I'll be here when you're ready. I love you, and I'm so sorry." She squeezed his hand, grateful for his understanding, but still uncertain of what the future held. The journey ahead felt like a long, dark road, and she didn't know if she could make it through. But she also knew that she couldn't stay in this limbo forever. She had to make a decision, one that would determine the rest of her life. That night, as she lay in bed, she thought about the choice before her. Could she forgive him? Could she let go of the hurt and rebuild the trust that had been shattered? She wanted to believe that they could make it through this, but she didn't know if she was strong enough. She had always believed in second chances. She had always believed that love could overcome anything. But now she wasn't sure. The pain she felt was too deep, too fresh. She needed time to heal. She needed to find her way back to herself before she could even think about trying to rebuild their relationship. The next few days were quiet. She spent more time on her own, reflecting on everything that had happened. She thought about their life together, their memories, the moments that had made her fall in love with him. But she also thought about the betrayal, the lies, the broken promises. It was hard to reconcile the man she had loved with the man who had hurt her. She knew she couldn't stay in this place forever. She couldn't live in a state of uncertainty. At some point, she would have to make a decision. But for now, she needed time to process, to understand what her heart wanted. She didn't know where that path would lead, but she knew she couldn't continue down it until she found the strength to face the truth. The following week, they had another conversation. This time it was different. She had spent enough time thinking, enough time in silence. She had made a decision, one that wasn't easy but felt right. "I've thought about everything," she said quietly. "I've thought about the hurt, the betrayal and the trust that's been broken. But I've also thought about the love we've shared, the family we've built, and I've realized that I'm not ready to give up on us yet. Her husband looked at her, his eyes wide with hope. What are you saying? I'm saying that I'm willing to try. I'm willing to try and rebuild what we've lost. But it's going to take time and it's going to take work. And I need you to be patient with me, because I don't know if I can fully trust you right away. But I want to try. Tears filled his eyes and he reached out to hold her hand. I'll do whatever it takes. I'll be patient. I promise. And for the first time in days, she felt a glimmer of hope. It wasn't much, but it was enough to make her believe that maybe, just maybe, they could find their way back to each other. Weeks passed, and with each day the distance between them seemed to shrink. It wasn't easy. It wasn't perfect. But slowly, they began to rebuild their relationship brick by brick. They spent more time talking, more time listening to each other. At first, the conversations were awkward, filled with uncertainty and hesitations. But over time, they grew more comfortable, more honest. He shared his regrets, his fears, and his reasons for what he had done. She shared her pain, her anger, and her longing for the way things used to be. They started to make small changes. The way they looked at each other shifted. There was no more avoiding the uncomfortable silence. They made a conscious effort to reconnect, to remember the things that had brought them together in the first place. They took walks together, something they hadn't done in years. They laughed again, even though the laughter sometimes felt a little forced at first. But with every laugh, with every smile, they moved a little closer to healing. It wasn't without its setbacks. There were moments when old wounds would open up again, moments when doubts would creep back in. She'd catch him looking at her with that familiar expression, the one he wore when he knew he had done something wrong. She'd feel the weight of the past bearing down on her, and for a split second she'd wonder if she was doing the right thing. But then she'd remember the way he was trying, the way he was showing up every day trying to make amends, and it would make her question her own doubts. It took time, more time than she had expected. There were nights when she lay awake in bed, thinking about everything that had happened. The betrayal still stung, the memories were still fresh, but she had also come to understand that healing wasn't a straight line. Some days were better than others. Some days the pain didn't feel as sharp. Some days they could laugh together without thinking about the past, and other days the weight of it all would come crashing down again. But with each passing day they were moving forward. Their children had noticed the change too. At first they had sensed the tension in the air, the distance between their parents. But as things slowly improved, they began to see their parents smiling more, talking more. Their home felt a little lighter. The warmth that had once filled the house was slowly returning, and with it came a sense of normalcy. One evening, as they sat together on the couch, watching their children play in the living room, she looked at her husband. The man she had once loved so deeply, the man who had broken her heart, was sitting beside her, his hand resting gently on hers. He wasn't perfect, but he was trying, and for the first time in a long while, she realized that maybe that was enough. "I never thought we'd get here," she said softly, her voice filled with a quiet sense of wonder. He looked at her, his eyes filled with gratitude and relief. "Neither did I. I know I've hurt you and I can't undo what I've done. But I'm so grateful for your forgiveness, for your willingness to try again." She smiled softly, her heart heavy but full. "It's not easy, but I think we're getting there, slowly." He nodded, his expression sincere. "I'll keep trying every day. I'll keep working to prove to you that I'm worthy of your trust." She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of everything they had been through, but also feeling a sense of peace that she hadn't felt in months. "I know you will, and I think that's what matters, that we're both willing to try." The days ahead would still hold challenges. There would be moments of doubt, moments when the past would threaten to resurface. But for the first time in a long while, they were both looking toward the future, together. They were no longer defined by the mistakes of the past, but by their willingness to work through them. And as they sat there, side by side, watching their children play, she realized that forgiveness didn't mean forgetting. It didn't mean pretending the hurt never happened. But it did mean allowing room for healing, for growth, and for the possibility of a future together. Maybe things wouldn't be the same as they once were. Maybe the scars would always be there, reminders of the pain they had both endured. But they could still build something new. They could still rebuild their trust brick by brick, day by day. And that, she realized, was enough.